Some people just want to live a quiet life, but the whole world just doesn't want to give them a hand. Poor Kira. He's not some evil mastermind sociopath that wants world power and growth and strength. He's just a humble fellow that wants to be left alone. And that's why he's greatness. Comparing him to every other villain, not only in the series, but the majority of villains in fiction, they usually have the active role, while the protagonists generally have the reactive role. No better example of this required than Dio in parts 1 and 3 of JoJo's, where in both cases, he took the active role to grow in influence and power, where our Stardust Crusaders or whoever played the reactive role, which was going to stop him. Interestingly enough, you'll be hard-pressed to find stories where the reverse is actually in effect. And for the most part, that's what makes fictional villains so fascinating. But in this scenario, where the reverse applies, it manages to make Kira far more interesting than initially expected, and helps him serve the role as the major antagonist of part 4 handily. Okay, I'm gonna stop. But hand puns on this guys are way more fitting than on Shigaraki, and come to think of it, you imagine Kira meeting Shigaraki? He'd be like a pig in mud. Anyway, back on topic. Kira is the only anime villain in my top villains list that is not there because of some fascinating psychology or philosophy. I've heard people attempt to describe the ingenious ideology of hand fetish man, and I do not subscribe to that way of perceiving him at all. He's one of my favorite villains of all time because of how brilliantly part 4 was crafted around him, whereas if he'd be typical shonen villain number 12, I doubt I would have liked him to this extent. But my respect for his character magnifies infinitely by the painstakingly brilliant angle to the entirety of part 4. Anyone I talk to about part 4 agrees that Kira is a fantastic villain, but whenever I ask anyone why, I never really get an answer that leaves me content. When I talk about other villains, I see Aizen as a character with a brilliant psychology. I see Pain as a character with a brilliant philosophy. I see Stain as a character with a brilliant ideology. And everyone would agree to any of these statements that I've made, whether you like that individual villain or not. To most people, Kira is an anomaly, and I've actually had people tell me that the more they think about his character, the less they actually like him. So, if you're like me, and you like Kira, but you're not 100% sure why, then this is the perfect video for you. I spent days on end thinking about this, and I've been pushing off making this video kinda since part 4 ended. So I hope you enjoy, and let's just jump into the insane appeal of a seemingly one-note serial killer. And to do that, unfortunately, you have to understand everything about the nuances in writing the greatness, which is JoJo's bizarre adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable. Or just like in the series itself, the focus is on the crazy happenings of the city, whereas the epic background character and underlying terror is Kira. That's how we're gonna have to tackle this analysis, because that's what the epitome of what Kira is. He is the underlying, very human darkness of the world, and so much more. Throughout all of part 4, every character interaction, every big landscape-shaping moment, those bouncy rocks that Koichi used to save Yandere Hair Bimbo, the Angelo Stone, the wacky Italian restaurant, an electricity tower with a guy that lives in it, a guy who can shapeshift that claims to be an alien rolling through town with that mystery never even resolved, an alleyway that barely exists, a spot that sucks you into an abyss if you look behind you, a serial killer walking the streets like anyone else in search of the perfect high five, and so much more. It's only really appreciated by the second viewing, but thematically, the town of Morio is the main character of part 4, which makes every character in the town that builds it up essentially a support character to watch what part 4 is trying to be. Because of that wacky stand arrow, stand users are popping up everywhere, and due to powers of fate yet to be explained, stand users are drawn to one another, making an entire shadow society of stand users constantly interacting and bumping into each other, changing the landscape of the peaceful little town of Morio into the personality it eventually garnered. Hundreds and thousands of unpredictable human variables, which going about their lives, creating an internal chaos into the serenity of Morio, just like every actual city has. I mean, let's be fair. A town without an Angelo Stone is like a Joseph Joestar that isn't accidentally impregnating bitches across 3 continents over 3 generations. In other words, it's dead. And it's for this reason that I get somewhat of a Durarara vibe from JoJo's Part 4. Because the main character of that anime, no major spoilers inbound, is the city as well. The most interesting character from Durarara is a guy named Izaya. This slightly psychotic badass gets a kick out of trying to predict the unpredictable nature of humans, gathering as much information about as much as possible, watching as the mix between coincidence and fate occur in the town to his enjoyment. I really want to do a full video on Izaya at some point, but his psychotic fun that he's having watching this city is the same exact psychotic fun that us viewers are having watching the city in Durarara, as well as the town in JoJo's Part 4. Like any main character should, the town of Morio gets plenty of character development, and the way I would define character development of a town is the character interactions within, because a town is only the sum of its parts. A town is nothing without its inhabitants. Yoshikage Kira is a small individual piece of the massive puzzle that makes up Morio, influencing its personality by only just a little, like every single one of us influences the society around us by presumably less, because I assume most of the people that watch my anime videos are not serial killers, but then again, this is 2019. PETA might finally take over and dub anyone that doesn't walk their dog more than twice a day a serial killer. So I appreciate that this term may end up outdated, just like the term Nazi, which these days basically means person who disagrees with my opinion. Thanks, retarded Suzaku. Very cool. But the point is, every single one of us has a group of friends or colleagues or acquaintances, or if you're a weeb and have no friends or colleagues, but even the most minute of actions we can do absolutely butterfly effects and changes the personality of the society we inhabit, if only just a little. And that is a core theme to the entirety of Part 4, as I may explain in a future video. Now, Kira affects other people slightly more than most, proving the amount of impact one individual with a weird fetish can have on the society around them if they can't control themselves. I am going to get back to this point in but a moment, but I wanted to mention another fascinating character trait of my boy Kira at this point, a character trait that people seem to be overlooking. We see the way Kira acts and evades detection, coming up with strategies, etc., and I see people calling him a serial killer slash genius. And I want to point out that that is incorrect. Kira ain't stupid by any degree, but he's no genius, and that's what makes him complete greatness. The word I can think of to best define his planning and stratagems is meticulousness. Kira is meticulous with everything he does, looking at everything from as many angles as he can, and he's still imperfect. He isn't necessarily smarter than me or you, but the amount of time he puts into his decisions and the amount of thought he puts into his actions gives us the perception of him being genius. Any of us can be as quote-unquote genius as Kira if we were as meticulous as Kira. Oh, and he's also not overpowered, but I digress. You just need to keep this in mind for a future point of the video. Kira is the unseen dark side of society, and it's ugly, evil, and driven by the most carnal of desires, but it's not overpowered per se. One of my favorite aspects of Kira's superficial character is that after he triggers an explosion leaving Jotaro barely conscious and proceeding to take down Koichi, one of the most manly characters I've seen in my entire life, he sees Jotaro limping towards him, and of course his satisfaction that these two people, the only two people that know his identity, are about to be blown to bits to the molecular level without a trace of them remaining. Kira wants to live a quiet, normal, peaceful life, and in a moment that reality will be in his grasp once more, snuffing out the only ones that could oppose him. And then the half-dead Jotaro, despite being in terrible shape, completely decimates Kira. He hits him with a barrage of punches that really lets Kira know how inferior he is in so many ways. Kira barely flees and uses a backup plan that he's obviously had in the back of his mind for a while. Had his identity ever be discovered, he escapes, grabs a random dude, instantaneously gets plastic surgery, kills the surgeon who saw his new face and the person whose complexion he stole, and in a moment completely blends back into society. Until this moment in the series, he was the active party where the protagonists were the reactive party, as most fictional stories go. But in this moment, their roles immediately swap. He's in hiding, trying his hardest to juggle blending into a new family he becomes a part of and remains unseen in society. All of a sudden, the protagonists became the active party searching for him, and he, this perverted villain, became the weaker reactive party. Plot-wise, we start following his character's actions as more of a main character than even Josuke and friends. We follow his inner monologues and his nervous state of being, and just like one would relate to an average main character, even if our ideals wouldn't match, we start relating to Kira. We see he isn't some crazy crazy, overpowered super genius. He's just insanely meticulous like any of us could be. He's trying to connect with his family that he's currently living with because the plastic surgery made him look like someone else. So if he doesn't completely take over that guy's life perfectly, then, well, that guy is out of place. The good guys will know that that is Kira's new face. I hate that that rhyme. As he attempts to fix a marriage that was already broken, in essence becoming a better husband to his new wife than her former husband was, he has to completely play into the role he's taken over, but at the same time, he has to try to improve on that point. We see him struggling to maintain a marriage despite, since there were already hurdles he was going into that job with, and we watch him succeed. And this is a success in something that all of us struggle with. We all have relationships, or know people, be it parents, friends, or other family, that struggle to maintain a close relationship as well. Kira succeeds. Kudos to him. He has to try to deal with a troubled child, but it's not like he's some genius and social mastermind that he could figure out how to do so, and in that case, just like so many people, he fails. Once again, being relatable. There are a lot of kids that get lost in their upbringing for one reason or another. Kira, the former hunter, has become the prey and lives as a drone doing his 9-to-5 job, knowing that everyone's watching for him, and if he'd step one toe out of line, that toe may get crazy diamonded. But despite all the meticulous steps he's taken to remain under the radar, and despite the fact that he blends into a normal life so well, you can't help but see his human side, he still has that rather odd fetish of his. It makes lolly porn borderline normal. Okay, retarded Suzaku, we're not going that far. Back off. He still wants to get his hand job, but from just a hand. Granted, that personal fetish is not something I personally relate to, although I'm sure some people do. No king shaming on the Taku channel, but on the superficial level. Granted, he wants to find beautiful women, destroy them at the atomic level, and keep their hand until it starts rotting. But in all honesty, that's a pretty obvious metaphor, in my opinion, to anyone with an insatiable desire for something societally irrational. Something that we'd all have to live with if we'd have something like that, even if it would be on a much smaller magnitude. By the end of JoJo's Part 4, I fully relate to Kira as a human being, even if I don't necessarily respect his super deep, complex philosophy or psychology that people seem to be crediting him for. There are certain villain analyses I've done where I find myself personally relating to the psychology of the villain, and that's really not what Kira's trying to get across. I relate to the humanity of Kira, and that's really what I think he's going for, with Morio as the main character, and him representing the unseen, disgusting dark side of society. The most terrifying thing that the enemy could have done would be to fully humanize him. And congratulations, Diamond is Unbreakable, 100% success. So now to fully put into words a sentence that only after watching this video holds meaning, or only holds meaning after seeing Kira this way. There are many Kiras in the world, and they're just like any of us in many ways, but still, they seem further removed from us because we don't understand them. No one understands the Kiras in society. Kira as an individual is one of my favorite anime villains of all time because he fully humanized exactly what we try to convince ourselves we aren't. He caused the false psychological, existing, yet reality-wise non-existent barrier between us and what we perceive as societal monsters. Well, that barrier bites Zadasto, and that's the purpose of Kira, making him one of my favorite anime villains of all time, in one of my favorite settings of all time, within one of my favorite arcs of all time. Maybe I'd be getting too personal here, but I know a lot of the people that society would deem as problem cases, when in actuality they're just burnt out of the system and are perfectly normal people. I see Kira Yoshikage as a brilliantly depicted humanization of what society would rather treat as inhuman. Societal outcasts are more often society's fault than not, but despite this, it would be easier to write them off as monsters, when to take the blame and fix your mistakes, get yourself a little dirty, isn't as appealing. Much easier for whatever reason, be it strange mannerisms or a different culture, to excommunicate them as a societal Kira. It's much easier to turn a blind eye and just ensure that no one understands Kira. And that's why Yoshikage Kira of JoJo's Part 4 is one of my favorite anime villains of all time. To further humanize him, Araki actually made an entire spin-off manga with his ghost as the main character wandering the streets of Morio. We got 3 chapters of A Dead Man's Tales, or whatever it was called. It was actually pointed out to me by Adianplore, if I pronounced his name correctly. He's a JoJo YouTuber. I will link his channel in the description. Feel free to check him out. While I don't feel like it added an extra layer of depth to his character, it just went to show that he's living his own life, or afterlife, I guess. I hope perhaps you can see Kira in a different light after watching this video, because it's an angle I don't see approached in regard to his character, and it's really the only way I can see him at this point. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed, leave a like if you did, and feel free to subscribe for future JoJo's or anime analysis or satire videos. Link in the description to my Twitter. Feel free to follow me there. To my merch. Feel free to pick some up. And to my Patreon. All patrons are invited to the Discord server. And I wanted to especially thank Florida Man, Dominique, Miriam Ramirez, Q, Praise Lord Dugirugameshu, Billy Thompson, Mitochondria, Nate, Philippe Brights, Sergeant Malarkey, Buried Minotaur, Kaiser Juanar, Crazy Beat, Divine Rames, Miku Teakui, TM Philly, King Beats My Meat, Negus Nogus, Age of Snake, Pop-Up Grumpy Welshman, Team Sparky 65, Lazy Ronin, Girthy Worm Jim, Allison Stricker, JD Fincher, Cosine Pitch Shifters, E-Laser, Sash, Ethan Price, King Tank Games, and Frisky Dingo. Thanks to the Lord Twigger Rank, Meezy Jeezy, Anthony Booth Steelers, Cream My Pancake, Prella, Rari, MD, Santo Kiyomasa, Zindergarden, James Patterson, Emperor Misha, and Kyle the Warrior. Thanks to the God Usopp Rank, Burning Bush, Dark Element, Eduardo Flores, Muafa Kubesi, Necro, Sunny Parks, and Maurice Luis Dreyfus, and thanks to the Has Hashirama Cells Rank, Gremin. Thank you all so much for watching. Until this point, let me know what future videos you'd like me to do, be it JoJo or anything. And don't turn a blind eye to anyone, because we really are all human. Granted, we all have our slight idiosyncrasies, and some of us are more weird than others, but I think that's a good thing as long as weird is not taken to the extreme of wanting to chop hands off people and put that hand in your pants. That gets a little too weird in my personal opinion, but a little weird is good. So with that said, remember to stay weird, fam.